Who gets to label someone else as a terrorist? That's a question I've wrestled with for a long time. I started asking it after I came home from Iraq. Back then, I was a libertarian, a Ron Paul guy, trying to make sense of what I had just been part of and what I was coming home to. He was the anti-war guy on the right, so he felt like the candidate for me. When Ron Paul lost in 2008, a lot of the people in that orbit didn't just fade away. They became completely wrapped up in conspiracy theories, like the idea that McCain stole the primary election to help make Obama the president. Some of them became the Oath Keepers, and I mean that literally. Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the founder himself, had been in that movement. At the same time, I was meeting people from the opposite end of the spectrum. Socialists who saw the United States as an irredeemable, evil empire that needed to be completely dismantled because the system was far too broken to fix. And on both ends, there were people who justified things I understood to be terrorism. But there were also people who challenged me, people I didn't agree with, who forced me to think more deeply about where those lines actually are. My buddy Ray, a former Marine, once told me, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter," and that always stuck with me. And then I met someone who changed my life. She was an Iraqi refugee. Her family fled during Desert Storm. A generation before that, her family had been forced out of Palestine with the creation of Israel as a nation-state. That story of violent ethnic cleansing was one that I had never heard before. And through her, for the first time, I heard what it felt like to be on the receiving end of American weapons as a child, from someone I loved. She told me about the terror, the way that it affected her and her family. She told me about the trauma that was imposed on multiple consecutive generations. When I look at the legal definition of terrorism, it's hard to reconcile what we did, what I participated in Iraq. Under U.S. law, terrorism is defined as premeditated politically or socially motivated violence against non-combatant civilians or property intended to intimidate a population or coerce a government. If I really sit with that, every word of it, it's hard not to see the contradictions that we all try to ignore, because it forces a much harder question. Who actually fits that definition? As I'm recording this, we're weeks into a war with Iran, launched without congressional authorization, without preparation, and without accountability. Civilians are dead. Global systems are destabilizing. The consequences will be felt far beyond any battlefield. And yet, while the U.S. government projects violence across the globe, it's also doing something else. It's labeling Americans as terrorists. In Minneapolis, we watched as people like Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy were murdered in cold blood by masked federal agents. Within hours, the Trump government labeled them as terrorists, pushing narratives that didn't match what we all saw with our own eyes. A lot of us committed to making sure that while the Trump administration took the lives of Preddy and Good, we would protect their legacy. But it doesn't stop there. The label is also being used against people who are still alive, people who can be prosecuted, surveilled, and financially ruined. People like Ian Austin. I interviewed him while I was in Minneapolis at the Abolish ICE live concert and fundraiser with the Dropkick Murphys. Ian is a former Army Ranger, 6 deployments, a combat veteran who believed in what he was doing when he went overseas over and over and over again to fight terrorists. He has spent years trying to come home from those wars. He went to Minneapolis because he saw a threat to the Constitution that he swore an oath to protect, and he felt compelled to continue his service to his country, even though he took off his uniform years ago. And for that, he's now facing federal charges. In this conversation, you're going to hear what that actually looks like from the inside. Not just the legal consequences, but the psychological damage and financial costs of being targeted by your own government. We're keeping this interview pretty raw on purpose, because I want you to see, hear, and feel what happens when the government decides an American veteran is a terrorist. And because Ian is going to need your help. If the Department of Justice moves forward with this case, which it looks like they're going to, his legal defense could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, money he simply doesn't have as a disabled veteran. There's a link in the description where you can support him directly. I'm Kris Goldsmith. This is On Offense. Ian Austin, welcome to On Offense. We are a podcast where we're trying to convince people that they need to stop taking a defensive posture in the United States. We have spent 10 years with countless op-eds, countless news stories about defending democracy. You are someone who I think has sprung to prominence in activist circles, especially, and people paying attention to what's going on in Minneapolis, because you are going on offense for democracy. You're also a veteran, former Army Ranger, 6 deployments. Can you tell me why it is that after 6 deployments in the global war on terror that you are still in the fight for democracy?
Yeah. Well, you go on 6 deployments like that. I mean, it's deep, right? It's rooted in there. Like, I really believed in what I was doing, and I believe that I ended up in an unjust war, and a lot of the things, as I understood it, that I was fighting against, or what, as it was explained to me, this religious extremism, yada yada yada, imposing this on other people, that I'm seeing that here now. And if I'm being sent to fight against that, and that same thing is happening here, how could I sit here and do nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's past time for us to act. I feel some shame that I wasn't acting sooner.
Mm-hmm. So you recently went kind of viral for an interview that you did with Mother Jones, where they asked you like what it is that has brought you out into the street. And you talked about how you saw children in your own country running from federal agents. Can you kind of talk about that experience, going from being an enforcer of the law? That is what we are as soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, right? We are enforcing the law as the United States sees it. We are supposed to abide by international law, federal law, the rules of warfare. But what we're experiencing in this country is an occupation by a federal force that doesn't seem to be concerned with the rules that we abided by proudly as soldiers overseas. So can you tell me what it feels like to see children in our country running from federal agents?
Yeah, it's sort of a pit in the stomach, I would say. The way it really struck me and sort of sprung me into action. Well, since the last election, presidential election, I felt like I was screaming from the rooftops about what's coming down the pike, and Project 2025 had come out, and it seems like we weren't taking it seriously. And when the election was over, it was so devastating for me. It was too much of a strain on my mental health to pay close attention. And that's also was a personal struggle for me, because it's so important for us to be paying attention in a time like this, right? And so I really just focused on my treatment, and I was doing dialectical behavioral therapy, and trying really hard and being pretty effective at not following along what's going on. I'm like, I know where I stand. I don't need to be following along every single day and having it dysregulating my nervous system.
Yep.
So for me, it was Renee Good being murdered that sort of pierced my veil, and okay, I feel this in my stomach. I have to do something. So I'm going to go out there. Am I going to fly or drive? And 24 hours later, I was driving out there, or out here. I don't know if that really answers your question. So
yeah. So we're you and I are meeting for the first time this weekend at the site where Alex Preddy was murdered by DHS. And this is a place that has become your home away from home. You're not from Minneapolis.
Right.
Can you tell us where you came from and like what was it that drove you here?
Yeah, born outside of Philadelphia. That's where I was just before this. And yeah, I mean, I was literally sitting in a coffee shop to do homework for the dialectical behavioral therapy. It's like 5 hours a week intensive group program, and it's a year long. And I've been, for 10 years, been trying everything under the sun, from Western medicine, alternative methods, trying to work on PTSD. And so that's my total focus. And like I was saying before, sort of not intentionally not focusing on the news in order to preserve my mental health.
Yeah.
And then just a rush coming over me when Renee Good was murdered of, okay, I have to act. I have to do something. I feel like with mental health, like my brain can be a little bit tyrannical, but the body and my stomach are a lot more honest. And it's saying, do something now.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what drove me out here. And what's difficult for me about that is the people in my life that I respect as humans, that would probably call themselves liberal, that have been really close to me my whole life and seem to actually not be understanding why I would be out here.
Yeah.
The system's going to hold, democracy's going to hold. And to me, it's like, what if you're wrong?
Yeah.
You're someone who's seen combat several times. You've seen what it looks like when democracy does fail, when the state uses violence to try to enforce democratic norms, even if sloppily and ineffectively, as I feel we were certainly in Iraq, the war that I participated in. Do you think that the people who are still preserving their mental health by disconnecting, do you think that they are making a conscious decision? Or do you think that do you think that it is so frightening what they're seeing on television, what they're seeing in the newspapers, that they're not distancing themselves because they think it doesn't matter, but they're distancing themselves because they're terrified?
I know for myself that it was very much it was painful to be like, okay, I'm not going to follow along right now. But it also, just for me personally, it was I know where I stand on this, and they literally told us what they're going to do. So me following along every day isn't necessarily giving me new information. What is concerning to me, I think, is there's a different sort of look the other way or bury the head in the sand a little bit, which is just that there's so much going on in the world. It's all so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Some might say by design. And so it's more comfortable. I think a lot of what we'd seek as humans is comfort and safety. And it's pretty scary out there right now. And then to consider, at least for myself, and I think a lot of people, wait, are we the good guys? Like this American exceptionalism that we've always had. And that's a lot to face.
Yeah.
And so, I remember over the last 2 years, saying things about fascism and warning about, 1930s Germany and things, and people laughing at me, that I love and respect. And I don't think that it was laughable. Like, it was objectively, there was a lot of the markers were there.
Yeah.
But to face that potential reality, I think is a lot for a lot of people that maybe don't want that to be the reality. And so maybe it's easier to sort of look the other way.
So you were recently charged under the FACE Act, which is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It was a bill that was written to protect women who need reproductive health care, because anti-abortion protesters commit violence. not just against women patients, but against the doctors, nurses, and other healthcare providers who serve them. In order for that bill to pass, way back when, Republicans wanted to make sure that there was a protection for religion, because they have convinced their base that Christians are persecuted here in the United States. I think that people who take a more objective view of reality recognize that Christians dominate our government and our way of life in the United States. They're not under threat. I was born and raised in the Catholic Church. I've never been persecuted for being a Catholic. As someone who fought for our country, who swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, you swore almost the same oath as the prosecutors, law enforcement who are coming after you. Do you think that these prosecutors are violating their oath in the same way that the ICE agents, who are actually the foot soldiers of fascism, are?
I mean, I don't think we have to look further than the prosecutors that are quitting. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, as I understand it, 2 of Don Lemon's lawyers were going to be on the prosecution team and quit and started their own firm because they're being asked to sort of do gymnastics with the law. Mm-hmm. And that's always happened. I think it's just at such an extreme right now that a lot of people in the legal system are going, I don't want to be a part of that.
Are you afraid? You're someone who has faced fear throughout your life. It is something that I don't know you very well at all. We just met for the first time yesterday, but you seem to me as someone who's drawn to danger. Are you afraid, or do you just not have that in you?
I feel like there's sort of a 2-part answer there. I definitely am drawn to it. You know, I think it's sort of a weird part of coming from being at home in PTSD and depression and very depressed. Mm-hmm. And I'm out here and suddenly I'm very alive. Yeah. But it's this kind of horrific environment. But, so, you know, in the same way that like climbing mountains and doing things that are a little bit dangerous, I feel the most alive. Yeah. And of use. Now, scared, I would say, you know, if you're doing rapid response and an ICE vehicle pulls up behind you and an ICE vehicle pulls up in front of you and they're ripping people out of their cars, we've got guys being executed on the street 50 feet away from us, mm-hmm. You know, there's definitely been times where I felt as or more in fear for my life than I did in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And then in a larger context, well, actually, I would also speak to that and just say, you know, for me, I'm comfortable there. What's so impressive to me is all of the Minnesotans out here doing that don't have that experience, mm-hmm. and that are just regular moms, dads, brothers, sisters, putting themselves in very dangerous situations. And I sort of have a rush coming over my body when I say that, because it really is. It's like, this is kind of normal for me, mm-hmm. but I'm so impressed by the community. Now, as it relates to federal charges and, you know, the Attorney General talking about me by name, the president calling us terrorists, there's some fear there. You know, I think actually right when I got out of my arraignment, I spoke to Mother Jones. I think I spoke to that when I was talking to them, that fear, I mean, yes, no, I don't know about that, but definitely caution. Yeah. You know, like not fear to where we're going to stop what we're doing. They want to silence us. They don't want us to use our voices. But when it comes to, okay, this nation that I swore this oath to, that I went to war for 6 times, to then being persecuted by that government. You know, you're sitting in court and they go United States versus criminal Ian Austin, and it's like, mm-hmm. whoa, this is a lot. And then you break it down to, okay, what am I being persecuted for? And I would say standing up for the foundations in the Constitution that I swore an oath to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some, I don't know if it's just fear or pain from that. Like that hits me really hard. That's really hard to, because and I don't know, I don't think I'm special in any way, but you spend 10 years sort of trying to come home from war. And I think it's a lot of fucking pain. It's a lot of suffering. Yeah. So, so sort of feeling all of that, like the cost for me, right, was so heavy.
Yeah.
And then to be persecuted for now what I would say, like, I am standing up for that oath that I took in a more just way than I ever did in combat or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just been tough for me. I sort of have waves of emotion around that.
Yeah. As a veteran, I imagine that hearing about the murder of Alex Preddy hit you pretty deeply. Can you talk about your relationship with the VA and what Alex Preddy, not a nurse that you got healthcare from, but what this man who was murdered just across the street from where we're sitting right now, what that meant to you?
Yeah, I mean, just as a human, even before the VA, like that's what, I mean, the people of Minnesota have been doing, putting themselves in harm's way. And, he's right outside there trying to help a woman up.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, to me, gets summarily executed on the street. So, I mean, just even separate from the VA, that was just so much. I mean, I've been staying right down the road. And that morning, actually, it was so go. That was the first night I actually slept. And so I slept through it, and I was actually late getting down here. But the care, to go back to the VA, I mean, it took, and it's not unique to me whatsoever, it took me 3 years to go to the VA. It took me multiple years to consider PTSD might even exist, might be a real thing.
Yeah.
We're out there like, well, we're doing all this running and gunning and we're fine. Not realizing, of course, it's a defense mechanism, right? And so maybe this is a little bit more general, but the VA has always gotten a bad rap, at least to me, from the community talking about it. My experience has actually been overwhelmingly positive with the VA for the most part. You have things here and there, but I needed help. I sought help. I got the health care that I needed. And I mean, being 100% service connected, I have more access than other people, but I've always had a pretty positive experience with it. And I mean, as in with any profession, you're going to have people that are just so good at their job or so invested, like, emotionally. And I feel like that's what you saw with Alex, right? Is not only just the outpouring of love, but that to and from work, that he's so in the community, he's out here trying to keep everybody safe. So I don't know, it's an emotional mess for me sort of talking about the VA, because I feel very positively about it. And I also have some sort of struggles with it.
So there was something that I think you said was pretty profound, and it's something that a lot of us experience, and that's this period of denial where our symptoms of PTSD are crystal fucking clear to everybody except us.
Yeah.
And we see ourselves as unbothered. And we may truly believe that.
I'm fine.
Yeah, as I did for years. I thought, well, for a year after I came home, I was I thought I was totally fine, but I was drinking myself to sleep all the time. I was getting in fights for fun, and I was hurting other people as much as I was hurting myself. And I kind of wonder, as we're talking about this, what I'm thinking is like, are the American people right now going through a period where they're actually being affected by this shock and awe, and they don't realize it's affecting them? Do you think that's the case? Like, do you think that's why there's some people who just aren't invested, don't seem to care? Do you think they're in denial?
I think that what you're talking about is there's some like long run sort of societal things that have led to this in a way, with, you know, through media, social media, through the amount of information that we're taking in a day, right? Is, I don't know the numbers, but it's like something like a human takes in the amount of information in a day that somebody a couple hundred years ago took in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. Like so it's so hard to keep up with everything. And then a lot of, you know, seemingly by design, you know, this flood the zone tactic.
Yep.
Oh man, that was going right to the end of your question, but now I don't remember the actual.
So I was wondering if you think that people kind of like have PTSD and are in denial.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I haven't thought about that before. I would say almost certainly, in a way. Yeah, you know, I mean, we've been just from, you know, okay, so in trauma, there's big T traumas and there's little T traumas, you know, a major car accident, an assault. And I've experienced big T traumas before the military, but people can experience little T traumas, and if they're not, well, everybody does actually.
Yeah.
And if they're not addressed, they compound over time and build into something bigger. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what's happening with society at large, is all of these little T traumas, and it's kind of like, oh, nothing to see here, like we're fine, or the news cycle changes and we move on. But they're sort of stacking up and stacking up.
Yeah.
And now these massive world events are happening. It's almost like we're having a Watergate a day, you know, and it's like, how do we, you know, that's overwhelming. It's so overwhelming. How do you manage that? And so maybe the looking away sort of that we were talking about is one of the ways that people do that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so you're talking about these big T traumas, these little T traumas that every human being experiences. There's no one who's immune from trauma, though I think that a lot of our peers may be in denial about that. You know, shit that happens when you're a kid that you kind of shrug off is actually deeply affecting you, and you may not realize that until fucking years of therapy. Like that is, I've done, I don't know, close to 2 decades of therapy for PTSD, and like I'm only starting to now with my therapists like address things that happened before the military, right? So I'm not blaming anyone for being, you know, I use the word in denial, but maybe unaware is more accurate. Do you? So we all experience traumas, and a lot of people are, you know, maybe don't recognize it if they're not in denial about it. A lot of what you have been through has been because of your government. You signed up, you know, you volunteered to fight in a time of war. You knew what you were signing up for, as much as a kid growing up in the United States can understand, right? As much as we can. Yeah. Do you think that going to war is how you found your empathy, your compassion, and your conscience? Or did you find it at war? Did you find it after you came home through treatment? Like what made you right now?
So I think, you know, I can look back to like being on some firing lines and things in Afghanistan, and psychologically maybe I wasn't there, but I think my gut always knew. Mm-hmm. So I definitely, it wasn't in war, but it was a choice that I made of, I am not functioning I need help. And so I very consciously chose, okay, I'm going to go through this, and hopefully it can be of use in some way down the road. I've had many ideas of how that could look, but I don't, for me, I was suicidal. It's like, I don't have a choice, I'm going to kill myself, so I've got to do something.
Yeah.
And so it was through making that choice of, this is going to suck and I'm going to do it anyhow, that shift took place. And it was through researching, looking up different modalities. How does the world address these things? Western medicine, alternative modalities, and then through that process, which I'm still very much in.
Yeah.
And I was sort of delusional. I did this journey around the world, experiencing these different modalities, and I believed in that process. Oh, one of these things is going to click, and then I'm going to be better.
Yeah.
And so I'm with Wim Hof in Poland. I'm in India doing meditation. I'm in the Himalayas practicing this Wim Hof method. I'm doing Tai Chi in China, and all of these experiences are profound and impactful. But the whole time there's sort of this pressure building. There's this pressure building. I'm not better. I'm a failure.
Yeah.
I did plant medicines at the end of that journey, and that sort of released that pressure valve. And there was a sense of relief, I guess, a release of pressure would be a relief. And so it's been through that process. It wasn't from war, but it was actively making this choice of, okay, I have to figure out a way to maybe get back to normal. And in that process, I've learned there isn't necessarily a getting back to normal, and it's not a quick fix. This is a long, long road. It really helped me when somebody once told me, if you were in this environment for 6 years, it could easily take you 12 years, twice the amount of time you're in such an environment to sort of unwind it. And then when you have other traumas, big traumas in your life, and it becomes complex PTSD, it's a lot harder to unwind it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say from war, but having that experience, I believe, so many people that have historically been, I used to be conservative, I used to be so many of these people that I'm trying to reach now. And I think that having that outlier experience, that sort of taking this, I would say, masculine or aggressive way, what leads to war, conflict, and so seeing that to an extreme gave me this window of, okay, I have to go down this path to heal from that. And maybe a lot of the world that is, as we were talking about before, just kind of looking the other way a little bit, and because this is a lot, can do that, because I feel like I can see this so clearly from this going to this extreme that it sort of revealed itself a little bit to me. Sorry, maybe that's a little bit out there, but
do you think with the activism that you're doing now, and you're proactively seeking out confrontations with ICE, you are trying to make it difficult for them to terrorize American citizens and people who've come to the United States to live the American dream. Do you think that you are treating your PTSD, or do you think you might be making it worse?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And the reason that I ask that is because I am someone who's obsessed with justice. I always have been since I was a little kid. When I saw what I interpreted as injustice, I was obsessed with trying to make it right. When I came home from Iraq and got out of the army and first started treatment, I remember talking to my first doctor that I saw for a few years. And I remember one day calling it the Judge Dredd complex. And that was like an epiphany moment for me. That was the best way that I could describe what I thought in my head. And for people who aren't familiar with Judge Dredd, it's a comic book character in a dystopian future where police serve as judge, jury, and executioner, literally. So they call these police judges, and they literally perform executions, right? So for me, what that looked like in 2006, 2007, 2008, after my deployment to Iraq, was if I were in a bar and I saw a guy get handsy with a woman, I would physically intervene. Yeah. And I would put my hands on the person. And that was a major fucking problem. I'm lucky that I never got in legal trouble for it. Yeah. But I'm also lucky that when I had my left orbital shattered and had my could have lost my eye or could have died, that I didn't. And that kind of woke me up to realizing that I've got this complex. And I have, in the following, years, I don't think I've changed that much. I think I've still got this obsession with justice. I've got a show called On Offense, right? Because the point is to impose a cost on the bad guy. I'm still really doing the same thing. Yeah. I'm just not putting my hands on people. I'm not breaking the law. I'm looking to work within the legal system, the set of rules that we have. And I ask whether you think you're treating your PTSD or making it worse with your activism today, because I'm like asking this question to myself. Yeah. I'm like, I've spent the last few years, and I'm not doing it nearly as much anymore, like infiltrating extremist groups, being in the ugliest places on the internet, and putting myself and my family at risk of retaliation, which, manifested in some really fucking ugly ways that several people have gone to jail for, thankfully, because I collect evidence for a living, and these people are fucking stupid. But I don't know if I can answer this question myself, whether I'm making it worse or whether I'm making it better. So I don't know, I guess I'm asking for advice. Yeah. Do you think your fight is compounding your injuries? Or do you think that the justice and knowing that you're right, knowing that you're on the right side of history, do you think that the net effect is that you are excising the demons that you've been dealing with?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a cop-out, but I think the answer might be both. Yeah. And I don't actually know, but I definitely had some thoughts on it in terms of, I was a few hours away from going to fight in Ukraine when they asked for foreign soldiers. Mm-hmm. And I didn't end up going because at the last minute I realized, wait a minute, if they're saying I can't leave till this ends, that might be 5 to 10 years. I'm uncomfortable signing my life away for that long. Mm-hmm. The doctors that I was working with at the time were extremely against it. Mm-hmm. Because of PTSD. I didn't end up going. Sort of a very similar thing in my stomach of coming out here of, I have to act. Mm-hmm. And there is some concern about that, right? Because I was doing an intensive therapy program before this to treat PTSD. And you're putting yourself in these stressful situations again. As I understand trauma, it stores in the body. It's a physical thing. So much of it is beneath language. And I think a lot of that is unavoidable. Like, mm-hmm. There will be a cost for this down the road. I've worked with a whole bunch of different body workers and trauma experts, and one of the most, I would say, like, powerful people I've ever worked with. She's been really clear with me. I saw her when I went home for 2 days from here after my arraignment, and she was just being really clear that, hey, trauma is being overwhelmed without enough support. And that this situation out there, the situation that you're in specifically, is very overwhelming. And you're going to need tons of support. And I can feel in my body, the intensity. And so I know that there is a cost for that down the line. Yeah. But at the same time, with my dialectical behavioral therapist, she's been very supportive of me being out here and actually sort of having to take a step back from how active I'm able to be in that group, because she's going, well, everything that we've talked about of how you want to be in the world, well, that's what you're doing. They call them life worth living goals. And it's like, you're doing that right now.
Yeah.
So I was honestly a little bit surprised by that they were supportive of, hey, this is right in line with everything you've been talking about. And I don't even know if I would have noticed that myself necessarily. Yeah. It's just, I got to act, and now I'm out here, and this is probably bad for my health.
Yeah.
So I think in that, like, in almost a spiritual way, it could be positive. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, just the level of nervous system heightenedness and just dysregulation, that there will be a long-term cost to that.
Yeah.
Kind of both, I guess, back to the beginning.
Do you think that you've been made a target in part because you're a veteran? Do you think that the administration is coming after you, trying to brand you as a terrorist, as the president is trying to brand you as a terrorist? That's the White House. That's not right-wing press or something. That's the president of the United States. Do you think that they're coming at you this way, realizing that if they can take you down as a veteran, that it makes it easier to take out other people, take them off the field, whether it's ruining their life through a court process that they know they'll never get a guilty conviction, but they'll put you in a ton of debt and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think, there's kind of the church part to this, and then there was my first arrest just out in front of the Whipple Federal Building, which actually didn't end up being an arrest, just a detainment. But they took me in there, and they weren't Homeland Security wasn't asking me anything about what happened outside that got me brought in. They couldn't comprehend, you're from Philadelphia, you're this Army Ranger, like trying to tie me into some sort of like underground movement or something, mm-hmm. and couldn't comprehend that I was just like, no, I felt a duty to be here. So it did seem like from the very, within like 16 hours of being here, I was taken into detention there. And that was really jarring to me of, oh wait, they don't actually care about what happened out there. They're trying to tie me to this other thing, and they stole my cell phone and they scanned it in front of my face, mm-hmm. presumably as they're calling us terrorists, hoping to find something that makes me look like that.
Yep.
And then there's the city's church protest, where the first people arrested are Black organizers, mm-hmm. media, and Will Kelly, the woke farmer. Mm-hmm. Nothing changed for me. I was there the whole time, but they only arrested those people. And then, so it seems like, okay, this is targeted, right? Because there was at least 39 of us there. Mm-hmm. They only want these people. Seemingly, I'm like in the clear. And then I go viral on Mother Jones, and within 24 hours, I'm being surrounded by FBI and I'm taken. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think in any way because I'm special, right? It certainly, though, seems to me like they had a reaction. Yeah. That they went, oh, okay, here's the people we want. And then, oh, wait, this guy's getting millions of streams suddenly talking against Donald Trump. We'll take him too, yep. Interesting, like seemingly maybe to silence me, but all they did was put more focus on this, which is interesting. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. I don't remember what the question even was.
Yeah, so Ian, one of the questions that I always ask my guests, the point of the show, is to teach the everyday American what they can do to go on offense. what do you think that the people listening to this podcast, wherever they are in this country,
Yeah.
what do you think that they can do to go on offense and
Yeah.
protect our democracy?
Okay, maybe a little bit of a long answer, but a book that I read, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's got a change formula in it, and it says pain times dissatisfaction plus first steps equals change. And it's like, I think whether you're right, left, or indifferent, everyone can see and feels we need a change. Like this isn't working. Like we're not healthy. We're not happy as a people. And you know, so a lot of times what we'll see is people like talking down, like, oh, you guys shouldn't be posting, or you guys shouldn't just be doing a protest in the streets, and that's not going to do anything. That's not. It's all of us, and it's whatever you can do. But I think what people need to realize is that not acting. I mean, to me, that's complicity.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's whatever way that you can. Whether it's a protest, whether it's donations, whether it's organizing, you know, I think that's a really big thing for me. You know, a lot of my friends that have resources and that I've always really respected in my life have been going, well, what do you want us to do? And it's like, well, start organizing, you know? I mean, can you quit your job? Do you have enough money to take some time off to try and help save democracy? You know, to prevent a fascist takeover. You know, I'm not necessarily a strategist in that way. I don't know what it looks like. How can we hit the system financially or do things that can give the people their voice back? But I think it's back to that change formula. It's enough people taking first steps. I think we have plenty of pain. We have plenty of dissatisfaction. So we just need first steps, and then we need people to take more and more and more steps. And that can look differently for all sorts of people, and in all sorts of ways. But it's just the taking action. And, you know, like myself, I came out here, I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, just like, I need to help. I don't know how I'm going to help. You know, anybody that's come to Minnesota, pretty much you go to the Whipple building, and then all of a sudden you get connected into the community, and you meet people over here and over there, and all of a sudden you're a part of this, you're a part of that, and that's how it happens. It's just the community coming together, and it's sort of off topic, but that's always struck me about what's happening here, and they're saying we're terrorists and all this. You go out to any of these protests, it's like the most loving, community-centered thing that could be happening. It's such a positive environment. So I don't necessarily have a specific of, oh, people should do X, Y, or Z, but it's the taking action. It's the, you know, I don't know, I have a poem it's called Shake Me Alive, and that it's like, sometimes we need to be sort of like shook a little bit, you know? And that's where I feel like a lot of Americans need to sort of like shake their heads, like hit their cheeks a little bit, like, all right, it's time for me to do something. And what does that look like for you? You know, that's gonna be different across the board.
I think that you have accomplished that. I think that you have shaken a lot of people up. Between the Mother Jones video where you're, you know, talking briefly about your history of military service and saying how devastating it is to see children running from federal agents, to the prosecution, the persecution against you for, you know, using your First Amendment rights, for standing up against the fascist regime. I think that you have done a pretty damn fucking honorable job of standing up for exactly that, of waking people up. So the thing that I want everybody to know is how can we support you? How is it that folks can support you and your legal defense fund?
Yeah.
I mean, you're Ian Austin, you're not Don Lemon, right?
Yeah.
You've gotten some press, but you're not famous, you're not a celebrity. How can people help the Army Ranger that's been targeted by the Trump administration? And you know, I think people should understand that it's not just a case. It's not just a court case. They're trying to ruin your life.
It's a political prosecution.
Yeah. So what can we do to help?
Well, that's super uncomfortable because it feels like, oh, there's this attention on me. And yeah, I mean, I have a GoFundMe, on my Instagram, Weapon of Mass Production, for legal defense. But I feel uncomfortable even saying that, because it's like there's so many people with more immediate danger, more immediate needs. But yeah, there's federal trial can get pretty expensive, so I've got a GoFundMe going on there. I mean, I feel like to me it would be more people taking action, more people coming together. For me, this feels existential, or like this is life and death. I mean, am I going to be facing 10 years in prison, or if this next election is sort of forcibly taken, are the resistors going to be the next ones being sent to concentration camps? And if I believe in democracy, or in, as I would put it, like the people choosing the direction of the nation, which I feel like we're losing that right, then it's life and death for me. Like it almost feels like that way personally, but for the country as a whole. So it feels like what would help me the most would be all of us going, all right, I'm ready to act. I'm ready to do something in their own way.
That was the perfect answer, brother. Thank you so much for coming on to On Offense. I definitely want to keep in touch. I want to know how your case is going. I want to know how I can help you, how the audience can help you. And seriously, man, I know this feels empty a lot of times when people say it, but thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And especially for your continued service after taking off the uniform, because I think you've done more for democracy in the last 2 or 3 months than most Americans ever will in their lives.
Could I just say something to that real quick?
Yeah.
When I very much feel that way, of that, boy, I'm being of a lot more service out here. And it's one of my favorite quotes: what I do for others, I do for myself. What I do for myself, I do for others. And, so for 10 years, I've been beating myself up. I'm not good enough. I'm a piece of shit. Sorry if I can't curse. But like, you go from this high functioning person to sometimes not being able to get off the floor, and really, really down about that. And suddenly, feeling of service out here, it's like, oh, well, maybe it was just a matter of perspective, and all of that time I was evolving into somebody who could be of use in this situation. And so now being out here, it's like, oh wait, I actually have more life. I'm less depressed, which feels weird because I'm in this horrific environment. But maybe that all of that work that I was doing before was for the others in a way, and this work that I'm doing out here is actually giving me life. And I guess I could also just tie that into, if people want to take action, it's fulfilling. It feels positive. It feels life-giving to be a part of community, to be a part of togetherness. Yeah.
Perfect. Dude, seriously, thank you for all the advice that you've given. I think that people listening to this right now are not just learning something. I think you're helping them feel what the people of Minnesota have been going through, and what people on the front lines like yourself have been going through. So thank you.
I hope it doesn't feel too much like advice. I feel like I've got my experience out of here, but I'm definitely not trying to tell people like, oh, this is how you need to do everything, But we can learn through each other, right?
That's it. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Now you understand what's at stake. Ian Austin is a patriot. He's not a terrorist. He's a human being who served his country, who went to war when he was asked to, and who is now being forced to defend himself against the same government that he once fought for. And he's not alone. What's happening to Ian is part of a much bigger pattern, one where a fascist government decides who is a threat. They apply the label, and then they use that label to justify stripping them of their civil and human rights. We're talking about mass surveillance, arrest, prosecution, financial ruin, and psychological pressure. That's what this looks like in real life. So the question isn't whether you agree with Ian's method of protest, the tactics he employs to protect the rights of others. The question is whether you're going to do something to protect his rights. Because once a government starts deciding who is and who isn't a terrorist based on politics, proximity, or convenience, there is no stable ground left for anyone. If you want to do something right now, you can. There's a link in the description to support his legal defense. If this case moves forward, it could cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars just to fight it. That's the reality of being targeted like this. And if you can't donate, please share this episode. Just talk about it with your friends. Make sure that people understand what's happening to patriots around the country. Because what the Trump administration is trying to do only works if people stay quiet and put their heads down to try and stay out of trouble. It only works if we don't put our arms around the targets of these prosecutions. And this only stops when enough people decide no more. On Offense is produced by Gina Kim and edited by the Lombardos for Valor Media Network. This episode was filmed live on location at the Black Forest Inn, just feet from where Alex Preddy was murdered in cold blood by Trump's goons. To support this community and to watch the Dropkick Murphys performance that was hosted at the Black Forest Inn, please visit abolish.ice.live. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode everywhere that you can. All the social media platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to Valor Media Network on YouTube. Because this isn't just a podcast. It's a tool for resistance. I'm Kris Goldsmith, and this was On Offense. I'll see you next time.